Welcome to Dollars and Dwellings. I'm Patrick Diamond.
And I'm Ralph DiBignara. Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to Dollars and Dwellings, episode 1. I'm Patrick Diamond.
Ralph DiBignara.
All right, so episode 1 is going to be, the focus is buying your first primary home. As in, I say primary, meaning like not an investment property.
You're going to live there.
Yes, you're going to live there. And it's a primary residence is special. It has special tax implications, but also it's basically, I think you have an interesting background because you bought investment properties early on, but certainly in my life, I bought, well, I guess that's not true. I guess I was a longtime renter in New York City, and I didn't want to buy an apartment in New York City, so I bought in like a beach town. So it really,
Which is kind of a second home, but it was really your first home.
it was my first buying, let me put it that way. It was my first buying experience, and it is my primary residence now. So I guess that's a little bit unique. But yeah, so Ralph and I, we grew up together. We've known each other since high school, or maybe even junior high school.
Yeah, junior high.
Yeah, we were roommates in New York City. We both rented together. And then kind of went our separate ways. You kind of went out to New Jersey. I've kind of gone up to New England. But I think we both have some interesting experiences around purchasing real estate. And I think we kind of want to get into that in this episode. Do you remember your first purchase?
Yeah, I bought a multifamily in Staten Island, New York with my brother as our first purchase, and which is a really, if you're in any area in the country, and New York and New Jersey, it's very common, but if you're in any area in the country, you can buy either something that's a multifamily property. When I mean multifamily, something that's 1 to 4 units, or you can buy in a place like Florida or Texas or California even, you can buy single family homes that have accessory units. Mm-hmm. It's the best way to start. If you can,
well, let me stop because we're going to focus on primary.
But that was my primary. So I'm saying, I think the best way to buy your first primary is to buy something that you live in but also rent.
Oh, all right.
So that was really my first buy, and it's a good foundation to build a portfolio off of, because on your first property, and there's a lot of ways to buy your first home at this point now. But as far as mortgages go, FHA is always a good option to start with because it's a 3.5% down payment, which is it's a pretty minimum down payment. But even past that, at this point now, there's every state, a lot of cities, and the federal government all have down payment assistance programs now. So for your first home.
Let's just talk about mortgages then,
sure.
Right? Because pretty much, I don't think I've never paid cash for a house. I think that's pretty rare for most ordinary
people.
Ordinary people.
Sure.
So you're basically an expert in mortgages. So let's just kind of talk about the main types, right? Like we all know about the 30-year fixed.
Yep.
I have a 15-year fixed. But run us through what else is out there.
Yeah, I mean, as 95% of the mortgage programs in the country right now, especially for first-time home buyers, are either a loan through FHA, which is Ginnie Mae. It's a government-based. They're all government-based agencies. Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. FHA is not a first-time home buyer program, but it's most first-time home buyer friendly because it offers the cheapest way to get into the property at first, and
meaning lowest down
payment, yeah.
Okay.
And a low down payment with favorable interest rates. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac also offer programs now with as little as 3% down, so they kind of all jumped on that bandwagon. Believe it or not, they don't really publicize this as much as you would think, but it's easier to buy a home now than almost it's ever been, as long as you qualify. And when I say qualify, you have a 580 credit score or above, and there's programs for below that. But
580 is pretty low.
Pretty low, yeah. You can show some kind of financial responsibility with your credit, which means that you're not you have some trade lines that you're making payments on, and you can show income, 2 years of income, and you can show enough assets to cover at least your closing costs and your down payment if it's required. So that's kind of like bare minimum requirements to buy a home at this point now.
Okay. Is DTI still a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, so DTI, which is debt to income ratio, is going to be, the best way to describe it is that your gross income, not before taxes get taken out. So if you're a W-2 employee and not somebody who's self-employed, let's say you make, let's use a round number like $5,000 a month. Your gross expenses are allowed to be 45% of that number. Now, those gross expenses are going to include your proposed mortgage payment, your proposed taxes, your proposed homeowners insurance, plus any minimum payment you have on credit cards or your car or student loans or personal loans. That's it. It's not going to include your cell phone bill, your health insurance, your electric bills, anything like that. Just anything that kind of reports to credit bureaus, which is in general personal loans, credit cards, student loans, and auto loans and mortgages. So,
let me interrupt you, because if it's not obvious, all of this is going to go on a mortgage application,
correct,
which is pretty long and ask a lot of questions. And if you're going to go down that road, you got to get organized. You got to know what all these expenses are, because you got to put them down. And it's been a while since I've done a mortgage application, but they ask for a lot of backup. Not only do you write it on the application, but you got to submit some supporting documents.
Outside of that, I think the most important thing, if you're going to decide to buy a home, right, this is your first time, I think the most important thing I can tell you that I would say is, what's your budget? What is your budget? Like, what can you actually afford? So, like, I always kind of push people over the years to say, hey, write down every single one of your expenses. Write down what you're willing to sacrifice, right? Am I willing to sacrifice going to get my hair done, my nails done, going out to dinner, whatever, going to sports games, going to the bar? What am I willing to sacrifice? What are my expenses, and what can I actually afford monthly? Because it's not that you shouldn't concentrate on the interest rate or the price of the home, but at the end of the month, when you get that bill, it's going to be your mortgage payment every single month. So what can you afford?
Right.
So if I can afford $3,000 a month, I can back into the amount of money I can borrow, right? And that's what I always tell people. So set a budget, figure out what you can actually afford. Because when I bought my first home, I was 23, and I thought I could afford it, and I guess I could at the time. But, and I'm sure you went through this too. I never forget the payment. Like they say, payment shock. It was really payment shock. It's like, whoa. Like, this is, I'm not used to this. You know what I mean?
My biggest shock was when the first heating oil bill showed up.
That's true.
But we'll cover that in a second. Talk about private mortgage insurance just real quick, because it's nice to be able to put a very low down payment down for a property, but there is a flip side to that, which is PMI.
Yeah. So it used to be you had to put 20% down to buy a property. Now and that was really never true, but it's specifically not true now. But even mortgage insurance at this point now. So on an FHA loan with a 3.5% down, you're going to have to pay something called mortgage insurance. So essentially, the federal government's going to take out insurance to make sure you pay your mortgage just in case you do.
And that's any down payment less. It's not just 3.5%.
Any less than 2%.
Anything less than 20% down.
But there's a caveat to that at this point. So you actually can put less than 20% down now and not have mortgage insurance, but your interest rate is going to be a little bit higher.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they've created products now, mortgage products, where you can actually get less than a 20% down payment with no mortgage insurance, but you're going to pay more monthly for it. Now, it may be $100, it may be $50, it could be, depending how much you take out, but those options do exist. And if you're going for a mortgage, you should be asking for that. Like, hey, what are my options?
So when I bought my first house, I think I put 15 down, and then interest rates came down, and the first chance the math worked, I refinanced to bring my mortgage rate down. But I also wanted to get rid of my PMI, so I actually paid a little extra in that I had saved
to get it down,
to get my equity to 20% to get rid of my PMI. With those mortgage products you're talking about, you never
it's
get.
not necessary.
It's not necessary.
No, it's not necessary. And sometimes you have to pay more upfront for it. They're like, hey, okay, you can get the same interest rate, but it's going to be a $5,000 charge upfront to have no mortgage insurance, and you kind of buy it out.
Yeah.
So there's a few different ways to kind of do it, but again, at the end of the day, I think what's most important, the reasons to buy a home, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, and where I've been successful with it is, what is my long-term strategy? What is my exit plan on that property? And what is my ultimate goal with it? So if my ultimate goal is to pay the mortgage off in 30 years and build equity, then get a payment you're comfortable with to make that payment, right? Yeah. And there's little tricks to that too, like making biweekly payments, and we can cover that in a different episode. But there's little tricks to kind of accelerate the payoff of the mortgage without you feeling it so much.
Right.
But I think it's important to kind of set a goal, and that goal may be hey, I want to only own this property for 3 years.
Yeah.
Or but when I got myself into trouble in buying houses, it was because I had no real exit plan. So when kind of like everything hit the fan in 2007, and my property that I paid $220,000 for was now worth $70,000, I had no exit plan. An exit plan would be, I can sell the property, I can refinance the property, I can rent the property. Like that would be an exit strategy on something. But I had no exit strategy, and the market kind of took away anything that would be normal in that market, because my house was worth 30 cents on the dollar. So I don't foresee that ever happening again. Well, not in the near future, at least. So it's a little bit different, but I think it's important to kind of know why you're buying that property, like with any other investment, right? Like what's the purpose and what are you long-term looking at?
Yeah. let's go back to mortgages again. So we've got you were talking about sort of FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, but we've got 30-year fixed, 15-year fixed, where your payment is fixed for the term of the loan, essentially. Your interest rate is fixed for the term of the loan. Let's talk about like variable rate mortgages and ARMs, which are other kind of mortgages out there. I think I don't know if I sent it to you, but there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal about how variable rate and ARMs. Well, tell us give us your take on what those are exactly.
Yeah, so an adjustable rate mortgage is kind of just that. For an adjustable rate mortgage, you're going to have one rate for a fixed amount of time, usually 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. So let's say that rate is 6% for the first 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. And after that, it's going to adjust based off of terms that are set at the beginning of the loan. And it goes off a certain index, but basically what happens with that is it's market determined, right? So if the market's up, it's going to go up. If the market's down, it's going to go down as far as interest rates go.
Right.
So
the article I was referencing, so I think ARMs used to be popular. Well, I think they're more popular when interest rates are going down, because you can kind of, when it resets, you can
go down.
Yeah, you're saving money. Your payment is lower because the interest rate is becoming lower. But right now, because of the weird world we're living in, this article highlighted the fact that ARMs aren't any less expensive than fixed mortgages right now, because of the way 30-year it has to do with treasuries, right? Like the yields curve on 30 years is actually lower than it is on 10 years.
So right now, usually there's a big spread. Like for a 30-year fixed mortgage, just for the sake of an argument, will be 3/4 of a point higher than what your adjustable rate mortgage would be. So if your 30-year mortgage was 7% today, your adjustable rate mortgage for a fixed term would be 6.25%. Right now, with the market we're in, it's not a desirable product for the people who are issuing the loans and or buying the loans, because the spread isn't more enough. So you're not really seeing them put out there as an option.
Yeah.
In general, if you're going to take an adjustable rate mortgage to take advantage of a lower interest rate, you want to do it from a place where you understand the product. Like I took an adjustable rate on my last primary residence. I took a 7-year ARM.
7 years is a long time.
It's a long time. And my plan ultimately was to either pay the house or sell it in 7 years. But I had a definitive plan.
Because I always feel like 7 years, you'll probably get a chance to refinance.
Something will happen. Yeah. But I had a definitive plan going in. So I understood. I was like, I'd rather take a lower payment and a lower interest rate for 7 years and get to what my goal is. Mm-hmm. Where people got in trouble with ARMs in the subprime market is they were taking 2- and 3-year fixed loans.
This is back in
03, 04, 05, 06, and what really helped crash the market. And they didn't understand the product. They didn't understand that if interest rates went up while it adjusted, they were going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's unfortunately a lot of what happened. They were being sold this loan that they didn't understand. There was worse loans than that. There was pay option ARMs, which is a whole different conversation, where you were given 3 or 4 payment options. None of them ultimately ended up being good. But if you're going to take an adjustable rate mortgage, it's really more of a sophisticated loan for somebody who understands why they're getting into the house and what their ultimate goal is. It's just a matter of understanding that and talking to a financial professional before you kind of go down that road.
Yeah. Now all of this makes me think that we could do an episode just on mortgages.
Definitely.
Because we haven't even touched on like VA loans for veterans. There's also, in terms of trying to sort of marshal liquidity to buy a property, things in my world like pledged asset lines of credit, where you can actually use money in an investment account to create a line of credit to use. There's creative ways.
And your 401k is an asset for your first home too. If you have a 401k, you're actually allowed to borrow from your 401k in most situations to make a down payment on a home. You're going to have to prove you're buying a home, but you can use that 401k to and then pay yourself back. So there are other things like that you can do to buy an asset.
I always try to get clients not to tap retirement accounts early, but you're right.
Yeah.
There's a special rule there. All right, let's talk. I think we could talk about mortgages all day, but we joked earlier about the other costs that you should know about going into a purchase of your first home.
Yeah.
I joked earlier that I couldn't believe when the first oil bill showed up, and it was like a punch. It was
expensive.
I think I closed on my house in 2010. Oil and the gas and oil in 2009, I think, hit an all-time high. My first home heating oil bill was $1,000. I couldn't believe
what's going on.
Do you have any Do you have any stories like that? Do you remember like what? I always laughed like, you have to buy you have to buy a little trash can for every bathroom. Like
Yeah.
there's just sort of like an endless amount of little costs or big costs
I
that go into this. Not only homeowners insurance, um, taxes, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that could come up. I mean, I own enough homes now that I've run into every single problem. But oil is definitely one of them. I have a house that's oil heat.
I saw a picture of one of your properties where there was a
Plumbing issue.
trench being dug
Yeah,
through the
I mean,
backyard.
just it's very, very important. And just so you know, as far as homeowners insurance goes, and nobody's going to tell you this, but I will tell you this: unless you're getting a policy from one of the major carriers, and that when I say major carriers, that's Allstate, State Farm, Geico, and just for the record, a lot of my policies aren't through those carriers. Not everything is going to be covered. For instance, plumbing. Nobody really checks their policies for plumbing. And to be totally honest with you, in 20 years of owning a home, I've never had a major plumbing problem until recently.
Uh-huh.
But what I found out from that is if the water's coming in from the outside of the property, all bets are off. Insurance doesn't cover a lot of that. You should really read the fine print on that. So I went from
It has to be one of your pipes inside the house that bursts.
yes. If it's
to
an
get
outside pipe that's causing the problem, which in my case it was, they only covered a very bare minimum, which was $5,000, and it's a $50,000 job. So
Yeah.
that could be disastrous. So just little things like that. But you said it like, what's your heating bill? What's the air conditioning bill going to be if in the summer? What's your water bill?
Right.
Does the home have sprinklers, like
Right.
landscaping?
South facing versus north facing. Are you going to have sunlight all day? That's going to drive up your AC in summer, but maybe
Yeah.
you save a little bit.
And it depends where you live too. Like I learned, I've lived in the Northeast most of my life, and then I started buying properties in Florida. In Florida, the roofs in Florida only last like 7 to 10 years. Where in the Northeast they'll last 25 to 30 years because of sun. In the South, and this is a lot of places in the South, there's a good chance, like we do termite inspections for every property you buy. Termite inspections are part of it. I've never in the Northeast had a problem where there was termites. Almost every single property I've bought in the South, there's been some sort of termite issue or past termite issue.
I had termites in my back deck.
Yeah. So and listen, that's a problem. Like the ones I've had in Florida, I've had to tent the house and fumigate it and come back. So there's just it's very, very important. And the best way that you can do this when you're buying a home is two ways. You can when you're buying a home, you can have the title pulled on the property to see if there was anything put on that any kind of major work or any permits were taken out to do work. So any kind of major issue that a property is going to have, a permit's going to have to be taken, and that's going to be an open permit or a closed permit on the title report, which is something you can ask your attorney or your title company when you're buying a property.
That's why contractors are supposed to pull permits. Correct. Because that gets recorded.
It gets recorded.
I never knew that.
So you can look at the property history of it. You can also, in most cases, call your insurance agent and see if there was ever a claim filed against that account. So just so you know, once you file one claim now at this point, it follows you for the rest of your life. It's the same thing with the
homeowners insurance
claim. So you can find out if there was a claim filed. So those are kind of major problems. A lot of people are buying flipped properties right now. Like somebody goes into a property that was older, they put some new fixes in it, and they go in it. You got to watch out when you go into that. Like the things that can get expensive with that is when you have a home inspection done, because you're always going to have a home inspection done when you buy a property. It's part of the process. The plumbing and the electric is something you really want to check thoroughly because that's the stuff that inexperienced contractors or property flippers will do the wrong way and it can get messed up. But it can become an expensive issue. So like these are all things to just be wary of going in and get.
I think that's a good segue into home inspection.
Correct. Yeah.
I feel like I did not have a good home inspector when I bought my house, and I feel like he missed a lot of things that, in retrospect, I wish someone had pointed out when I bought the house. In your experience, has home inspections gone smoothly, and have you had good ones or bad ones?
Good and bad ones. You have some that are overzealous and they make you nervous about it, but you have some that aren't showing enough. But like again, you want to concentrate on the expensive items. The air conditioning system, what's the shelf life on it? Yeah, HVACs. The roof, how much life is left on the roof. Any kind of plumbing that's going through, you want to make sure it's there.
Yeah. I replaced my roof pretty soon after buying my house. I have a pretty simple roof. It's like A-frame, but it was this is going back a couple of years, but it was $7,000 for a simple roof.
Yeah.
If you have a bigger house with a more
they could be $20,000. And then the other thing that, again, I just learned the hard way, which I'll never make this mistake again. Make sure your inspector, it's going to be an extra charge of $100 or a couple $100, does a city line check. So that's where I got screwed up because the plumbing issue I had just had in my house was not my plumbing line, it was a city line. But they can actually do a line check for you to see if there's any cracks in the line. And that could save you thousands of dollars, and it's a couple $100. So that's important in a property inspection to look at that. But if anything comes back on your property inspection report that says this seems like an issue, but I'm not an expert. That could be the foundation. I suggest you bring in an expert to kind of look at that.
Because I'll say when I bought my house, I knew nothing. I mean, I was a moron. I'd been renting apartments in New York City my whole adult life. I was fortunate that I had one of my sisters who has bought homes at least came to do the walkthrough with me and the inspector. So she asked some good questions about, like, there was a crack in the basement foundation, which wasn't a big deal, but it was. It's
worth asking
I'm glad
about.
she brought it up.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who, if it is their first purchase and they're going through a home with a home inspector, like, where do you even know? How do you even find out what to ask about?
I mean,
you got to do your research online, you think?
Yeah, but I also like to walk the house with the inspector, and they don't mind you doing that. Like, and just say, hey, and the better inspectors, just so you know, want you to.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you can stay with me. Like, and I would walk the house with them and say, anything they have concerns about, the better inspectors will like to point out. Hey, look, these window seals aren't great. It's kind of getting old. But remember, most of these property inspectors, they have to have licenses, but that doesn't mean they're a master of everything, right? So it's like, if they're questioning something, you may want to question it further. But here's the other issue that when it comes to that, though, part of what we talked about at the opening of the podcast is that we're in a different market, right? We started talking about mortgages, but the biggest problem right now is that you're in a market that's very competitive.
That's waiving inspections.
Waiving inspections,
right?
waiving appraisals.
Which just sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for that. So just so you know, what I suggest in this situation, if you're going to buy a property that you have to have, right? The seller is like, I'm only taking this offer if you waive the inspection and you waive the appraisal. All you have to do in that situation is say, that's fine. I'm going to do both for informational purposes only, but I want a mortgage contingency. Because as long as you take a mortgage contingency, if the house doesn't appraise where it's supposed to appraise for, or there's a big inspection problem, the mortgage company can still deny that loan and get you your deposit back.
Okay.
So if you're going to waive your inspection and your appraisal rights, which I don't suggest, but if you have to do it, tell them you're still going to do it for informational purposes only, but you're not waiving your mortgage contingency.
Okay, and then you don't think that'll spook a seller?
No, because I don't think I think that
they're not going to know what it is.
For better or worse, realtors and owners don't realize that that's really the whole card. And that's really what's the most important part of it.
Okay. All right. So we touched on some big things: mortgages, inspections. Let's talk about what should we talk about? Let's talk about using a broker or sale by owner. Have you done both or only one?
I've done both. I mean, if you can find properties off the market, it's easier to buy it that way, to take stuff out of the middle, but that doesn't necessarily mean to get the best price. Most homes that are for sale by owner, two things. If they haven't been picked up by a broker yet, it's because they're probably being unrealistic about the price. Because just, as soon as the for sale by owner goes up, they get about 3,000 calls from a realtor within 24 hours. So they see it go up too, just like you did, and they call to try to list the property. So they may not be the most realistic on price. So, I've bought properties both ways, but believe it or not, as somebody, I'm buying properties for over 20 years. I mostly buy properties I see in the market. It's just studying the market, and I'm very big on no matter where I'm buying.
So you don't use a broker?
I still use a broker in most cases, but if you're going to use a broker, especially in this market, I think the important thing for using a broker is you want that person to be a local expert. And when I say local expert, I mean local. Like, they know that neighborhood.
Hyper local.
Yeah, hyper local. Like, this side of the block is better than that side of the block. The bus goes here. The best supermarket is down there, because that's what you're paying them. Well, you're not even paying them. The seller is paying them. Just you don't pay any fees for a realtor as a buyer. The seller pays the fees. But
that's a good.
Yeah,
that's a good thing
the seller pays the fees. You're not paying for them. They're really working pro bono for you until the deal closes. But you want them to be an expert on the area, because if you get a realtor that's not from the area, they're going to really know as much as you're going to know about, like, the actual block that you're buying on, and that's not what you want. You want somebody who's an insider. That and the other thing too, what you're going to find, especially in a hyper competitive market, and I've run into this a million times, agents that know each other in those neighborhoods will take offers from agents they know before they'll take an offer from an agent they don't know, because they feel like it's a better shot of it getting done.
Interesting.
So they have to review all offers. Like, it's the legal right of a buyer to have every single offer be presented to a seller. But they can also convince the seller, like, hey, don't take this offer, take this offer. It's a better offer because I know it's going to close. So it's very, very important to work with a realtor that is familiar with your area.
No, that's a great tip. Um, I remember I joke, I bought my house in 2010 coming off the mortgage crisis of, 08, 09, and I don't think any houses were moving. Um, my real estate agent was so excited
To sell
to
something.
sell something. She she gave me like I think six different presents, like d bowls, dishes, a painting, like
Yeah,
it
if we could be back in 2009 on a time machine right now, we'd be in great shape.
um oh, here's a great question. What can you actually negotiate in a sale in your experience? I I remember it was definitely a buyer's market when I bought my
A lot
house.
more negotiation power.
Yeah, and I definitely underbid the house. But obviously that's not the case all the time.
No, I think you have three places where you get to negotiate when you're buying a house. First is on your initial offer, right? They're asking 400. I want to offer 350. The second is when your property inspection. Just your property inspection, and your property appraisal are two different things. Property inspection tells you the functionality of the house, and appraisal actually tells you the value of the house. So the two different inspections. So after property inspection, the property inspection report comes back. The roof needs replaced. You get negotiation power there too, and you give them the option to either fix it or take money off the price. And then at appraisal time, if the appraisal comes in lower than it's supposed to come, you have the right to back out of the deal at that point if it's lower than the purchase price. So at that point, again, you can negotiate again. So those are really the three times, and they're all within the first 7 days of the process. But those are your best negotiation times as far as when you're buying a property.
What can you negotiate from your financing perspective? Like if you're dealing, obviously you should shop around
For rates.
for mortgage rates,
Yep.
and not be afraid to play one lender off the other. But can you negotiate in your experience on fees and points and those?
So
Mention what points are
yeah,
briefly,
so
by the way.
so it's an interesting market right now. So as far as lending goes, for mortgage lenders, 98% of them are selling the same exact product, right? You're going to all of them to sell you the same product. It's like if you were going to a dealership and they had three cars to offer you, and they were all offering you the three cars, and it was who's going to give you the best price, right? So we're all basically offering the same products with around the same interest rates. There's a couple of things that are going to be variable. The interest rates will differ between probably an eighth of a point and a quarter of a point in some. Well, in most situations, sometimes it'll be a bigger spread there, but that's probably the most of it. And then as far as fees go, your banking fees can range. So banks have two types of fees. The first type of fees is what we consider junk fees, which are a fee to process the file, a fee to underwrite the file, and a fee to close the file, right? So that's one set of fees you're going to pay.
Junk fees.
Junk fees. Yeah, we call them junk fees, but that's essentially what they are, right? And then the other set of fees you're going to pay is either an origination point or a discount point. So an origination point is a point Pat getting a loan from Ralph. Ralph decides Pat's a pain in the butt. I'm going to charge him an origination point, and he's going to pay me to do the loan. That's purely a bank fee. There's no value to that.
They can waive it if they want to.
Correct.
They could increase it if they want to.
Correct. A discount point, a true discount point, is you're actually paying to lower the interest rate. So Pat's buying a property. He wants 6% instead of 6.5%.
Mainly because I want to manage my monthly cash flow.
He's trying to get a lower payment.
Yeah.
And a lower interest rate.
And I can pay for the privilege to get my payment lower.
Correct. So that's a discount point. So that goes dollar for dollar to buy the interest rate. The bank's not taking the money on that. That's actually going to buy the interest rate down. With that, the good thing about a discount point, right? It's your only closing cost that's tax deductible. Mm-hmm. So if you pay a discount, if it may make sense to say, hey, if I buy points to lower the rate, I'm going to save $200 a month, and I can write off the $2,000 it cost me to do it.
I do my own taxes with TurboTax, and I know every time that question comes up, did you pay for any points?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's actually tax deduction. So from a financially savvy person, it may make sense to actually do it because you'll get the money back.
And points seem to, and at least in dealing with some clients recently who bought properties, points right now seem to be common,
yes,
because it's one of the few ways you can get these higher interest rates.
Yeah, it's twofold. It's one of the few ways you can get a higher rate interest rate down. And right now, what goes on in a market like this, so believe it or not, Wall Street still controls a lot of what goes on with interest rates because they're still the biggest buyer of securitized mortgages. And what most banks do is they package mortgages up into a bond, essentially, and they sell it to an investor. Mm-hmm. Right now, the prices for those bonds, it's very hard to price them. So the way and I don't want to get too deep into this, but the way
Right. This will get confusing.
yeah, it'll get confusing. But the way Wall Street will buy something is that I'll pay this much for a 7% mortgage and this much for a 6.5% mortgage. The problem right now is that they know that if they buy 7% mortgages, they may not have a long shelf life because
people will refinance them as soon as rates drop.
Correct. So because of that, they want you to pay points up front for these rates because that's the only way they're going to make money.
They'll pocket that cash immediately. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, to try to simplify it, but that's essentially what's happening.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned points being the only deductible closing cost. I get that's a good sort of lead into the idea of mortgage interest being deductible, generally speaking. As a financial planner, we talk about good debt and bad debt. Credit card debt being generally bad debt because it's a very high interest rate, and once you've run up your credit cards, that's usually an indication that there's other problems out there. But mortgage debt is pretty good debt. One, you've purchased a home. I always say that purchasing a home is sort of like as long as you pay a good price for it, you don't overpay. It's essentially a forced savings vehicle, right? You 100%. Make your mortgage payment every month. You're
automatic savings.
You're building equity. That's basically increasing your net worth.
Correct.
And when it comes time to do taxes at the end of the year, the interest you pay on your mortgage is deductible as long as you itemize. I don't know if you itemize deductions on your taxes are probably fairly complicated.
They're complicated at this point, yeah.
I'm a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
My taxes are pretty simple. Like I said, I do them on TurboTax. I still itemize, and my mortgage interest, historically speaking, has been the main reason I itemize. But I'm far enough into my mortgage now that the interest I pay every year is getting low enough. And you either itemize or use the standard deduction, and we'll get a little bit more into this in another episode. But not everybody is able to take advantage of deducting your mortgage interest because you might just use the standard deduction. So if you're not super familiar with how you do your taxes, that's something you might want to kind of learn a little bit about, talk to your accountant, or read about it a little bit.
And the other thing is that you're only able to write off mortgage interest up to $750,000.
Great point.
And you're only able to write it up you can write off your property taxes too, but only up to $12,000.
$750,000 in value of the home.
Of the loan.
Of the loan.
Correct.
Good point.
Of the loan. So up to a loan amount of $750,000, and up on taxes, you can write off property taxes up to $12,000. So in most states, that's fine.
Enough, right? But some high tax states.
And some counties in New Jersey and New York, it's not enough. So but that for most people, it's a really, really good. It's your best tax write-off.
All right, we're coming up. We're kind of coming up on the 35-minute mark here. I feel like we could talk about this all day, but hopefully we've covered a lot. Not everything on my list, but I think we've covered enough to get started. We'll definitely have an email address to send questions into. So if you're going through this process right now and you have a question that we didn't cover, or we're both New Yorkers, so we talk fast.
Yeah.
So we may have blown through a topic that you wish we had gone into more detail on. We'll make sure the email address gets out and please send in a question. But I think that was great. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll kind of.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope and leave comments if you guys have more questions. You want to hear more things for us to talk at. Leave comments. We'd love to get back to you. Instagram, my website. You can always ask me questions there. It's info@ralphdbugnara.com. If you have something directly I said about mortgages, fire away. We will get back to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll come back for episode 2. But I'm Patrick.
I'm Ralph.
Thanks for tuning in. This is your co-host, Patrick Diamond. I'm a vice president and certified financial planner with Wealth Management Resources in Smithfield, Rhode Island, where I serve our investment customers as an investment advisor representative. My co-host is Ralph DiBugnara. Ralph serves as president of Home Qualified, the digital resource for buyers, sellers, and real estate agents. He's also vice president at Cardinal Financial, a nationally recognized mortgage loan company, and he's the recent author of The Growth Trap, a continuous plan to avoid the traps of life and build a better you. Our discussion is not tied to the offer or sale of any investment products or products in general. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be legal, tax, or investment advice.